Chapter 6. Merry Lwyd. What's with the new form? He asked when they had gotten home. Alan's tears of joy and relief mixed with the bitter knowledge that his original grandmother was still not back. This entity, calling herself the Big Wizard, had stated that she was a backup copy into which Jill had poured her very essence, so that while Jill 1.0 had moved on, an exactness of her remained, though one open to influence and change. I may be made of bones, she had joked, but I am not ossified in that sense. She may not be me, but I am she. It's called a Merry Lwyd, she said, pronouncing the latter term like the name Lloyd, meaning Blessed Mary. It's the equine symbol of a forgotten wizard cult from Wales in ages of yore. What can you do? Magic? Right, double quotation mark. Many forms of it, though I largely specialize now in mental cybersecurity and other computer magics, especially as these overlap with arthropodology, carcinology in particular. I'm the very reason you're not as dead as I was. She is. Ether, how? You're in terrible danger after all. Only not from me. From who, then? Right, double quotation mark. Whom? Dearest. His name is Carnival Jack, and twice now have I rescued him from his consuming light. For Jack brings holy fire for very his unholy murders. The Jester King of Yah is from our world originally, but he is currently expelled from it, unable to re-enter. The first time one of my creations saved you. Remember the cloud bat? Right, double quotation mark. That is what they are called. Alan cried, smiling in spite of his puzzlement and grief and relief. Indeed. Right, double quotation mark. But what does Jack want from me? Right, double quotation mark. It's a long story, but he has vowed to wipe out the bloodline of every wizard magnificent in existence due to a long grudge. That, unfortunately, includes me, and by extension, you, for I am considered among the most magnificent, capital M, of the Order of Paracelsus, and I was there when he became the vicious and mighty poltergeist he is today. A long story, you say, said Alan. I think we'd better get you some Coke and crackers, then. That always was your thing. The antlered crab god known as the Architect was made of crystal and lived in the notorious glass tower, which was now hidden within the rocks of Rainbow Reef in the Grey Plain. After you perish, a drumming green rain shall curtain your vision, eventually to be interrupted by a sour mist containing shoals of tuna carp and the terrifying grey-clawed snappers, an armored species of predatory turtle also known simply as the Greyclaws to the denizens of the beyond future. These creatures pose no threat to those who have already died. The Architect scratched an arcane symbol into a lithic wall of fossilized reef, and this rune began to pulse dim and dun and dim, with the illumination of a new computational function the chitinous deity has implemented on Earth. Perhaps this will help what I cannot, the Architect thought. Enter the Clockmakers. Chapter 7. Carnival Jack at the Well of Secrets. The year began the Great Merry Lwyd. His now skeletal and equine grandmother was 1912. Jack had come to us from murky origins, and he wanted to join our order. I've many times stated that I should have seen his true nature then. I suspect that some part of me did and simply wanted to give him a chance anyway. More the fool me. What? Right, double quotation mark. Jill reached out a sleeved limb and levitated a cracker toward her jaws, which snapped upon it with gusto, scattering buttery crumbs one way and another. Anyhow, I knew something was afoot by the time we were sent to scale the slopes of Kilimanjaro that winter. There were giraffes and lions around, and there was a great African weasel hog, which most don't know exists. Together we climbed, night and day, carrying on the back of a mule a child with a grave condition. We were to take her to the Well of Secrets for healing, a cousin to Mimi's well at the root of Yggdrasil, filled with the same starry fluid as many such reserves around the world. A friend of mine called Tick tends to a vast indoor pool of the stuff beneath a vast hidden cavern elsewhere. We had reached our destination when I deduced Jack's game, to sacrifice the youth and give himself immortality using an ancient and obscure incantation and ritual. He drew his long knife, and I unsheathed a hidden sword. We dueled, and I dealt him a non-fatal blow and defeated him. But when I took the child to the well, he leapt forth from behind us and slew the babe before attacking me as well. Again I bested the Jester King of Yore, as he had begun calling himself, and scored a more grievous injury against his person. He lay dying, and I tried to revive the child, but it was too late. I had foolishly allowed him to maneuver me near the well itself, and as he lay, he grabbed the child's carcass and jumped into the liquid, still holding it. Horrified, I beheld as Jack ascended from the well surface and into the air. His earthly body burned away, his forehead twice as tall and his heartbeat deafening. A poltergeist's heart, their keep, is not an easy thing to reach or penetrate. Off into the woods he fled, cursing himself for not facing me again and I eventually learned of an oath against every single wizard magnificent in the order of Paracelsus, to murder us all, to the one, and not just the wizards ourselves. He's also sworn to eliminate our bloodlines. By the way, the wizard magnificent added, I think the Ayab Ashrafs would like you to open that diary. Alan did so and found Inaya's handwriting in crisp dark blue pen. We know about the Carnival Jack threat. Have the big wizard take you to meet us, and we will rendezvous from there. Chapter 8. To the road. Oh, jolly peaches, the wizard exclaimed. I'm going to drive a convertible. Right double quotation mark. What if people see you? Alan asked. They'll just think I'm a tall Mary Lwyd and possibly a driving robot. Fair. Alan replied. Where are we to meet them? Right double quotation mark. We're headed southward, to West Virginia. Specifically a remote house hidden deep within the woods. No conventional Wi-Fi through which he can track us. And only the Ayab Ashrafs know, those who will also be there. Others will be present, but we have urged them to keep the utmost secrecy. Inaya handpicked a small few to accompany us. And another thing, right double quotation mark. The wizard's cloak brow was raised in curiosity above its gaping, dry old horse eye sockets. Do you have a convertible? Right double quotation mark. Nay, she cried. More an equine squeal than an English term for the negative reply. More word than word. Alan fancied it also sounded a bit like a giraffe grunt that became an elk's tinny bugling. Nay, she said. This time a word, however weird its ward. That was merely a jest. I will move my own way. Inaya has agreed to drive you. She's delayed her start at Brown now to protect her friends from this preying cloud phantom. Old Carnival Jack of the birthday attack. Oh, I'm terribly sorry to trouble her like this. Don't be. It was her own choice. Besides, Jack threatens us one and all. Alan considered for a moment. Then, what is a birthday attack? Right double quotation mark. It turns out, as explained by Inaya in the car, that a birthday attack is a type of cybersecurity attack that exploits a certain mathematical paradox. He didn't quite understand the details. If you take a classroom full of 30 children, she said already, losing him slightly, for he had little experience with such places. Packed into there like veal, like sardines. He'd feel exposed, like a sitting duck or an owl in daylight, and then use exponents to try to determine the likelihood that two of them share a birthday. You get a vastly different story depending on where you start calculating. It also had something to do with collisions, which sounded exciting when she and her father talked about designing computer and video games, but dangerous when driving a car. He was about to ask for clarification when she almost had a collision with a ground sloth, partly morphed into something between a lumbering brown bear and a shaggy ogre or troll. It clutched in its forepaws a bone that was mammoth in proportion and possibly in origin, and a dragon's skull slid about on its head's crest. Too big for this noggin and missing a shard of horn. Crap, Inaya said, then floored the pedal. The beast gave chase, roaring and waving its bony weapon in the air overhead, heaving itself somewhat sluggishly forward. Oh, thought Alan, another hostile sloth. I'm not convinced that the walrus witch's dream projecting ghost will always be there to save the day. He was technically correct. The walrus of Whistletooth Cave wasn't there to save the day. After the centipedes and elkworms showed up, all began to become rather chaotic. They'd descended from the trees surrounding the car and the sloth troll, and they swarmed the sloth and began assailing it quite fiercely. And Inaya drove off, flooring the gas pedal again, only slowing enough to allow for the road's not infrequent curvatures. Alan had seen a green anaconda at the Shed Aquarium in Chicago, and he'd seen huge yellow and white albino Burmese pythons at Alligator Adventure in North Myrtle Beach. Each had to have been nearly 20 feet, if not longer. He'd seen an illustration once in a book of a prehistoric Titanoboa, a lost god of the older Cenozoic eras, which appeared large enough to swallow an adult human. Some of the antlered elkworms and some of the centipedes and millipedes and remipedes were nearly 15 feet long, and some could have easily taken the Titanoboa. Together they descended from the trees all around and swiftly brought down the sloth troll, and Inaya just barely avoided the stress of a terrible decision. Would she risk trying to beat a train to a crossing in order to escape the sloth beast? She looked at Alan and said, The worms will carry the bones to the big wizard's ossuary to be used for data storage. Chapter 9. Encountering the Architect. Apparently, Jack had seen their route from afar and had timed the train in the earthly realm to delay them. The sloth was not his speediest minion, but it was among the closest at the time because of its dwelling in strange new Appalachia, and so he, Jack, the Golden King of Yar, had pulled a few strings in this realm from one of its closest dimensional neighbors, and the train schedule happened to line up. And if not for the good local worm folks of the canopies banding together, the big wizard said, Inea and Alan would have been trapped. That night, at the house in West Virginia, Alan dreamt something curious. He approached the great orangutan who presided over the Nexus of Swan, sitting at their drum set and completely surrounded by a ring of vertical bars with no top supported above. The orangutan, whose name was Mel, could have easily leapt or climbed free, but generally they kept inside and had been playing the drum set continuously each time Alan had seen them. Mel adjusted their punk-looking brow piercing and nodded to the journeyman Oniramancer, then slapped the cymbal with both drumsticks and pointed one of these at a particular section of wall in the seemingly sealed and insular cylindrical chamber of potentially unlimited height. The wall melted to either side, parting to reveal a gleaming archway portal emanating a whitish blue light that would have been blinding in the waking world. But things here worked, well, differently. Alan glanced straight above himself, marveling at how far the distance stretched. Was there even a ceiling? Alan had never seen or heard of these places having any sorts of direct finitenesses or hard limitations as the waking world would conceive of them. Even as he gaped up into infinity, a bit of altered Tennyson passed through his mind. Above me swell walls and no ceilings of millennial growth and height. Hopefully in roaring I do not rise, for then on the surface, I might die, seen by angels or not. And he thanked Mel before proceeding forward. Even as he passed through the consciousness portal, he could have sworn he detected a shimmering of purplish reddish light casting a brief flicker of lazy sunset orange across the ethereal and deceptively porous edifice of the front of the opening beneath the archway. He knew better than to dismiss it as something he'd merely imagined, as time was a bit more porous and fluid here as well. He found himself suspended in the sky, just below a blistering series of rolling clouds varying from altostratus to cirrocumulus, all composed of a curiously dull flame. Alan heard a high choir, bringing to mind Wagnerian operas and Tolkien's Legendarium, Goya's black paintings, Mozart's Dies Irae, all blended together in a devastating hymn to the great and terrible beauties of things far, far beyond his ken. A swarm of howling cloud bats then decided to swarm him, forming a spherical grid around him. He dared not attempt to flee their provisional cage. Suddenly, the fire clouds parted to reveal a celestially colossal figure that stretched to the very edges of his visible field. It appeared to be a sort of crab. The gradual contours of its galactically vast carapace a proud and regal golden red glinting brazen in the light of the fire clouds. This cosmically enormous crustacean bore a rack of antlers upon its carapace's crest, reminding Alan of the big wizard he had seen in a dream with antlers once recently. Greetings, a voice boomed, simultaneously inside Alan's head and seemingly aloud all around him. I am the Architect. I created all things with which you have thus far interfaced. Your reality, though I am not the greatest of beings. The big wizard has arranged for us to meet here, as it is critical that you know what is coming. Alan understood in an inexplicably intrinsic way that this entity existed across time and much of known space. He didn't have to wonder aloud, as the crab answered his next question for him. You are in terrible danger. The Order of Paracelsus is the weakest it's ever been. Carnival Jack must not be allowed into the Citadel. What's the Citadel? And how do I fight back? Right double quotation mark. The hand of time is drawn by. A violent thunderclap jolted him awake, and he noticed that he still perceived an angry glow. The house was alight. Chapter 10. Pyrokinesis. The wizard was able to put the inferno out quickly, but it gave Alan a good start. He made some cookies for them to share, and as these were consumed, Inea confessed the truth to him. I'm an alchemist of sorts, or have a Midas touch. I'm able to transmute objects by touching them. Last night, Jack's allies tried to visit my mind's outer parapets as I slept. I rebuked them soundly, but I lost control of my hands in this struggle. I'm glad I woke up to see what happened. How long have you had this ability? Right double quotation mark. I'm not sure. I just discovered it a few years ago. But it's naturally occurring. Naturally occurring? Right double quotation mark. Inaya nodded. Some people have powers from things they add or begin to practice. Say, eating a magic seed or studying arcane ways long and deep. Ah, he said. And my own aromancy? Right double quotation mark. Naturally occurring. Yes. The lad nodded. I see. Which reminds me, she then said, and laid a hand on the spikes of charred wood gaping in the floor. The ruined boards then ran it, coalescing like liquid before the three of them, and the house was whole once again. This is alarming, said the big wizard. If they can force you to start burning the house, can the all-pervading carnival light reach us? Right double quotation mark. Maybe, the young woman admitted. I hope I can learn to fend them off and not burn down our dwelling in the process. Chapter 11. The first day.